Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, how are you, man?
Hey, awesome. I like the background there. You got the
Yeah.
Gatsby going on. Awesome.
Yeah, that's my favorite, so I can't resist. Yeah.
Oh, it's so great to see you. Oh man, it's been so long.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about this the other day. Has it really been maybe like about 20 years since we've hung out?
I think it's been exactly that because Kent, right? And when did you move from Kent?
Oh,
2001?
2002, I think.
For me, it was 2001. So, and that's when I was hanging out with Jed and working on
Yeah.
my project, and you were there. And
Oh my
uh,
gosh.
yeah, it's been exactly 20 years. It's
Oh my
crazy.
God. Well, let me be the first to welcome you to our show, Make Your
That's
Own
great.
Fun. And everybody on the show today, I have John E. Saja, and the name of the book is Calling Me Back Again, the Beatles records at 50.
Ah, yeah, there it is. It's being weird on mine, but thanks for
No
having it,
worries,
man.
no
That's
worries. And you were so kind enough last year to send me an early copy, and I read the book cover to cover, and I really enjoyed how you put your own personal experiences, not only your growth and your interest in music, but also just your life in general, and kind of how you equated to it, related to it. Obviously, this block of time that you talk about in the book in terms of when the events actually happened were before either of us were alive.
absolutely, yeah. And being born in the 70s like we were, and the Beatles were already done.
But
John
before
Lennon,
they
I
were
talked,
all
yeah,
30, right?
yeah, they were all done with the Beatles by the time they were 30. That's right, yeah. Imagine that. Imagine achieving all that in your 20s and the rest of your life. McCartney even said, boy, you're going to carry that weight a long time. When he wrote that at the end, that's kind of what he was talking about. He knew that he was going to be saddled for better and for worse with this legacy for the rest of his life. And he's probably going to live to be 100, knowing him. So, like, it's a long time that he's going to carry that
It's
legacy.
I can't even get my mind around it. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day, knowing I was going to talk to you, and I don't know what else you could really compare it to in terms of, an entire decade. And the only person that I think went through a lot of that similar may have been David Bowie in the 80s, because he
Yeah,
was doing recordings, he was doing tours, he was working, doing,
yeah.
one-offs with other artists and everything, and making movies and TV shows. But there was probably a lot of cocaine involved with that too.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, we'll start at something that's upcoming, and then we'll work our way back. And I think we kind of briefly talked about this a while back. Is how on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your excitement level for that Peter Jackson Get Back documentary that's coming back in I think it's November. It's coming on Disney Plus.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanksgiving. So, you know, a, a lot of mixed thoughts. I'll give it like an 8, I guess. And the only reason it's not a 10, two reasons. One, Disney Plus, huge corporation and having their sort of tentacles in it. There's always a little bit of like that. I can't give it a 10, you know, uh, based on something like that, And another reason to me, like I was really looking forward to sitting in a theater for this
Yeah,
experience. And, you know, and
they
somebody said
they
to me,
may
well,
have some screenings. I don't know. I mean,
that's
I
what
think
somebody,
that
a friend said. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for that because, and a friend said to me, but 6 hours, how can you complain about that? And I'm very excited about that 6 hours aspect.
right. And I think that's probably why Jackson went with a streaming service, because there was some ungodly amount of footage, like 56 hours, or it's like,
Yeah.
how is there that much unseen footage? But anyway, he would have probably had to whittle it down to a 2.5 hour movie, and that would have been great. But I just think that, even though this band's been broken up for over 50 years, there's just that hunger. People want to know, like, well, so and
Yeah.
so said there was this acetate from 67 that's buried in a vault somewhere in Switzerland. It's
Yeah.
like it's never ending. So
Yeah.
in a way, it's for the best, because what's better than the Beatles? More Beatles.
Right. And one of my comebacks is when you think about stuff like Harry Potter or Avengers, Infinity War Endgame, like they broke those up into multiple theater experiences, 2.5, 3 hours a piece. And I think they could have considered doing that, like release 2 hours, wait a year, release 2 more hours, wait a year. If anything, it would have drawn it out. You know how they love to draw out their product, you know, with sequels and all that kind of stuff. That would have been another marketing decision they could have considered, but in terms of theaters, theatrical releases, keep it going longer kind of thing. But at the end of the day, anytime that somebody wants to help sustain the Beatles legacy, I'm all for it. You know, like we had the Across the Universe movie in 2007 was, I was all on board for that, loved it. You know, the Love Show in Las Vegas. Have you had a chance to see that by any chance?
I haven't seen the show, but I have the soundtrack album.
Yeah, it's worth checking out, you know, and
what's his name? Giles Martin. What a job.
Right.
I mean, that's
amazing.
a Herculean task to blend songs. I mean, and these are all standards.
Yeah, he did an amazing job. And we have to give a little bit of credit to Brian Burton. I mentioned him in the book a couple times. Danger Mouse, he goes by the name Danger Mouse. He did this sort of amalgamation of Jay-Z's Black Album and the Beatles' White Album. He called it the Gray Album. And that actually predates Giles Martin's project by, I don't know, maybe 5 years or 3 or 4 years or something. And he does a lot of the same moves. Some of Giles Martin's moves on the Love soundtrack are exactly almost taken from Danger Mouse on the Gray Album. So I just want to acknowledge
the best artists steal, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah, you know, whites have been sort of borrowing from blacks all for music history. I just wanted to mention that, you know, but anyway, you know, that is what it is. But you know, thank you for your comment about how you appreciated me telling my own personal story in the book, in my book here, because that can be a slippery slope. Because I've read some like there was this 33 and you know that 33 and the third series with the little slim little books, and every book's about an album. Like I read one on Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, and I was very excited to read it because I love that album very, very much. And I was like really turned off by it because the guy just wanted to talk about himself the whole time.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah, it
too much of yourself. It's like, well, I put this Fleetwood Mac title on it, and it's really just the guy selling his memoir.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so thanks for saying that, because I was really careful to keep it about the music. Whenever I talked about myself, it was how I was reacting to the music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
it was always reactionary to the music. And obviously you came to it, like we said earlier, way after the event. But I even remember, and I'll put this back, you know, God, we're so old, you know, more than 25 years ago when the anthology series came out. And it's kind of funny because we were talking about Peter Jackson's Get Back documentary, and we were talking about the theater, and it's like, I think they were smart because they got the widest audience possible to watch the documentaries, the anthology series at home. I mean, plus you had a lot of boomers that were tuning in with their children, and you had the added bonus of the 2 new songs. And that was like, I know not pre-internet, but pre-widely used internet, before cell phones. I mean, these were already some tracks that had been widely bootlegged and circulated in Beatles collectors circuits, but not the general public. So I remember hearing like Free as a Bird and Real Love, and you know, all the jokes that went with it, was Lennon recording it in a bathroom with a cassette player, whatever. But the thing is, they're beautiful songs.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and you know, and then I remember Beatles 1 coming out, and that really got a lot of the younger people back into it. But when we talked about the Get Back thing, it's like, well, you and I and our friends, and so probably some of our families, we would go to a theater and see Get Back. The generation before us would go back. I don't know that those kids, like people under 20, care, because I think to them, people barely remember Ringo, and he'll put out an album and tour. And McCartney's certainly still in the mix, making these weird collaborations with people where they give him like 4 seconds on a song. But Yeah, I don't know, and I
Yeah.
think that, and I'll put this out to you too, because I've struggled with this new documentary with Rick Rubin, the
Aha.
Bernie.
Yeah.
I've gotten a couple episodes in, and it's tough because I feel like, and you feel free to chime in. They're trying to make it feel like a old black and white documentary, and I almost feel like McCartney. You feel like McCartney is like not really into it because he's told these stories so many times. I mean, now Ruben, who is like a musician's producer, he's done every genre and worked
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
everybody, and he's just like this, like, yeah, man, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and then you took the piano like out of Eleanor Rigby, and it's just like the
Yeah.
octet, and that's cool, but I don't think kids are watching that. What do you think?
That's it's interesting. So many things to chime in on there. Yeah. First of all, he has told those stories very, very many times. That's correct. Uh, and I know that he sort of had a hand in, like, he had strict choices of what we're going to talk about. Like, he wanted to talk about Here, There, and Everywhere. He wanted to tell the world, make sure the world knew that he played the solo in Taxman. There's various things that he wants to be in the public knowledge, so that he was careful to put in that documentary. Um, there's a feel to it. There's this sort of like spontaneous feel to it that they're going for. It doesn't really appear that it's like pre-written when you're watching it. It just feels like two guys are listening back and talking off the cuff. So I think they purposefully went for that sort of vibe in the documentary, to keep it cool. McCartney wants to keep it kind of cool, and he's got a public image to maintain. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, and I looked, I don't know if it's true or not, but somebody said something about how his chins, like his skin down in his chin area was like, computer graphically, like, enhanced so that it was like smoother. Whatever. I don't
Maybe
care.
that's why they went black and white. I don't know. I mean, Ruben's just sitting there trying to look like the Buddha. He's just like, whatever you want to do, Paul. Like, I'll
Yeah.
go get the licorice, man. I'll just hang out.
Yeah, there is a sense there were certain stretches where they're just standing there listening, and you're like waiting for them to say something, and eventually they say something, but there's what they do is a lot of times they isolate things, and you hear things that you never heard anywhere before, in terms of them isolating it, and things that didn't make the final cut, like a track. They'll raise up a track that isn't on the final mix, and you'll hear somebody doing something like, what the hell's that? Never heard that before.
Right.
So my take when I walked away from watching that, my thought was, I would love for McCartney or not, anybody to be sitting there and listening to every single Beatles, and this might happen at some point, every single Beatles recording ever. Somebody sit there and just go up and down and talk about it like that, where they analyze and they pick it apart. There's
I don't know
200,
though. I mean,
yeah,
those two guys, I mean, I think Ringo is 80, and I think, I don't know if I think that they feel like, especially with Anthology and now with the Get Back documentary, they probably feel like it's been said or been done in terms of
yeah,
like covering that ground. I
yeah,
think the only way you're going to get something like that is maybe, and I'd be interested, but it would be weird, but is to have Giles Martin go in with McCartney and Starkey and
yeah,
Danny Harrison.
yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know what Julian's relationship is with the guys. It seemed like it was good for a while, and Sean just sounds like he's down for anything. So
Yeah.
because that's like, it would be reverent, but also kind of like they would have different takes from their dads that maybe even, well, Julian for sure. I don't know about Sean because Julian's older than us,
Yeah.
but he would know and hear things from his dad that I'm sure that maybe even the other Beatles never heard.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Has he written a bio? Do you know,
I don't know. No, I
Julian?
don't know about that. It's a
Yeah,
good
he
question.
kind of just stopped doing music for a while, and
Yeah.
the comparison was, I mean, that the weight of that is like, God, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, God bless like Danny and Zach Starkey, and I feel like Zach Starkey's just out there like, I'm good. I'm gonna play with whoever wants to play with. I don't
Yeah.
really write songs. I'm just gonna be a drummer.
Yeah. Yeah, talk about a legacy, talk about being born into something, it's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, it goes for all across the board. You got your
yeah,
Jacob Dylans, your people like that, which
yeah, yeah,
to be doing the same thing your dad is doing, and he's considered like the best like lyric writer. It's like not
yeah,
me. I don't know. I'm not saying I'd
yeah.
want to be a bricklayer, but my God.
Wow.
Um. So, yeah, well, I have a
Yeah,
question for you that maybe
yeah.
you've gotten or not gotten about the Beatles because it's something that your book kind of brought up to me, and I hadn't thought about for a while, which was in 1967 with the passing of Epstein. It seemed like McCartney became like the de facto, um, I wouldn't say taskmaster, but he became like the guy that was like, come on, guys, we're gonna book studio time. Come on, guys, I've got these songs, and come on, guys. And I don't know if the other ones resented him for it, but I don't know. I think Beatle historians have long wondered what would have happened if Epstein had lived.
That's a good question. That's a great question. I think if he had lived, they probably would have continued on pretty similarly to what they did. Only because he was just a sideline. At that point, he didn't have any much of a role anymore because his main job was to organize their touring schedules and such. And when they stopped touring, Epstein was sort of like marginalized and on the periphery. Obviously, he was still important to them, and he was like a friend and a supporter. And he would probably handle various managerial things. And I think the advent of Apple Records in '68 may not have happened. That's true if Epstein wouldn't have died. So that was a big development for sure. Um, as far as the McCartney being the bossy guy,
I mean, that's just how he was
yeah,
perceived, I think.
yeah, it's part of his personality, and I think the other two, like George and John, the other two main sort of songwriting forces in the band, were just sort of like drug dozy, sort of like they were just going wherever their sort of like mind's eye psychedelia was taking them. They were just like, oh, look at this, oh, look at that. They were very sort of sporadic and not really thinking linear. And McCartney was sort of like wanting to just harness and organize all of that. And he did LSD, but he did it much later than the other guys. And he tried it. He dipped his toe in it. He didn't want to he didn't do it like every single day for like a year, like Harrison and Lennon did. Like they were on it for a long time straight, kind of thing. So they were living in this like sort of like almost permanent trip that George and John were for like a year plus. And Paul was like the one. He was like the one that had to sort of organize everybody and get everybody to turn up in the studio times and all that. And but that being said, Lennon was a brilliant marketer as well. Like he the marketing. Like I talk in the book about all the times they say yeah. If you listen to their first 25, the first year, 63 through 64. Listen to all the songs where they say yeah, which was brilliant because that could be understood by somebody of any language. Any if you're listening in Germany or wherever or Denmark or it doesn't matter. Like when you hear them shout yeah 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 or oh yeah, like they're happy and they're saying yes. Like it doesn't, you know what I mean? You immediately get that. So Lennon was careful to like market, like, thank you girl. He wrote that song, for example, like, he knew he was like talking to the fans. So, and then to speak again on McCartney, when the Beatles ended and it was like right at the end of 69, early 70 there, when it was officially over with, it hit him the hardest, like, like George and John, they were eager to do their solo things out from under Paul's auspices, if you will. And Paul suddenly, he had where was he going to go? He knew, like we said at the beginning of the hour, that he was never going to top that, So he was like, what the hell do I do now? So
Just do
I know
my
that,
own thing, yeah.
yeah. So I know that was a lot there, but
and I do kind of remember the all the Alan Klein bullshit with those contracts. It was just really dubious and shady that I think that they were still legally like bound as an entity until like the early to mid 70s, even after the breakup. I think that
Yeah.
because um, Harrison and Lennon really kind of, it sounds to me from what I've read and heard, that they really strong armed McCartney because they kind of knew McCartney was the one that was having like the ballads that were going to number one on both sides of the Atlantic. And they were like, no, we're going to take a cut of that, which is like, today that would never fly.
Yeah.
That's
I,
just
I
crazy.
I recently you like Pink Floyd much?
Yeah.
Yeah, I recently saw this, like the Animals album that came out in 76.
Mm-hmm.
There was some contention there because if you look at the track sequence, Roger Waters is credited solo for Pigs on the Wing. It's like a little 1 minute introductory on the album. And he wanted to bookend it with a 1 minute closure at the end of side two, Pigs on the Wing part two. So, but there's only 5 tracks on the whole album, so the fact that Roger Waters insisted on having those 2 credited songs just to him, they're a minute a piece. And then there's like 10-minute and 15-minute epics that make up the rest of the album. That caused him to get more, royalties, and it caused contention in the band or something. So I see what you mean about the songwriting royalties and stuff like that. I think it was 1975, the date that you're referencing there, because if you ever get a chance to see that Martin Scorsese's George Harrison documentary,
I've seen it. Living in the Material World. Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing he did there. And I think the very, very beginning of that, it shows McCartney and Harrison, they're in the same room and they're signing papers in 1975. So that must be the event you're referencing.
I just remember Harrison being like, let this be done, Hare Krishna, let this be done, let this be done, let this finally be the end of it, and it's just like, right. I can't even imagine after that horrible event, of them breaking up and then still being like legally bound.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that they didn't have their issues otherwise. I mean, it's still baffling to me going back and reading your book and some other things that I've gone through over the last year. It's just like the weird relationship, the friendship, I guess I'll call it in quotes, between Harrison and Eric Clapton, with Harrison's wife. And 1 minute Clapton's playing on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and next minute basically he's playing Harrison's wife. I don't know, it's just like, but they were like friends, and it was just like a water under the bridge. It's just like, okay, man, I guess it was just the 60s. I don't know.
Yeah, Harrison was a complicated guy because he would walk the walk of, oh, we're just in these bodies temporarily, and let's not get hung up on earthbound things, that whole Eastern Buddhist thing. And I think part of that was why he was so chill about, oh, you want my wife? Oh, it's okay, you can have her. I'm not attached to her in this life, whatever. But then at the same time, like, he was Paul McCartney in that Scorsese thing. He was a red-blooded man. He liked his earthly pleasures. He liked his women and his cocaine and his mansions. You know what I mean? So, like, how do you make sense of that? I mean, because he would probably just say, "Oh, we're human. We're human."
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, and I know I kind of said it, but it was a different era, different time. No internet, no cell phones. So, as horrible as it was for them in the 60s to be constantly followed, photographed, scrutinized.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's anything right now that could compare to that level of scrutiny for a pop group or a rock band. But it would be so much worse now.
Yeah, it's funny because when you say scrutiny, you're talking about like privacy, and you're talking about like, what you expose. The age of we're living in now, I'm a firm believer in that the technology of any age is what drives artists and exposure and all that. And the technology now of social media, and you know, part of their appeal was, you know, you had to buy that magazine or buy that record or turn on that Ed Sullivan show to see them.
Right.
Like there was no other way to see them. Now you have, like, you know, real time Twitter feed access, and
I think it's too much. It's like I don't really want to know like someone's bowel movement cycle.
Yeah, right.
I don't
Right. And
I just don't want to know.
and it's spilled over.
I'm sure, you know, they had boring home lives. You know, they go home to their mansion and they just lays about, and I don't care about that. I mean, like your book, I think it was pretty spot on in being more just directly about the music.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, you know, I mean, you've probably read books and seen magazine articles where they just sensationalize, and it's tabloid culture. You know, you get any celebrity and, you know, Cher is having Bigfoot's love child crap that you see in the supermarket line, and you're like, whatever sells. It's just so sad, you know. And you know, one thing that makes me sad about, you know, the breakup of the Beatles and McCartney and Ringo getting a little bit, you know, less exposure than they used to, but you know, they are old men of a different era, is the I'm going to make myself sound old too. I just miss songs that were more about either stories or someone relaying a life event. You can still put a backbeat to it, and you can still make it techno or country or hip hop or anything, but it's just like a lot of the stuff I'm hearing now that's, you know, climbing the charts is just, you know, auto tune 2.5 minute of someone saying yeah and ooh, and it's like, you know, the Beatles had that stuff in there in their songs, like we were saying, yeah. And I love that. I don't know if you saw the the carpool karaoke with James Gordon and Paul McCartney.
I did.
They go into McCartney's old house, and they were talking about writing "She Loves You" and taking it to his dad, and his dad's just doing this with the pipe, and then just saying like, "I enjoy it, gents, but let's correct that grammar. Why can't it be she loves you, yes. To which Gordon goes, she loves you. Yes, she does. Indeed. And it's just like, you know, kids versus parents, you know, thank God they didn't listen to him.
Yeah, wow. What you said at the start of that comment about you miss songs that tell stories, and I completely agree. Like I was, you know, like something, there's a spirit or a not necessarily even a story or not, but like a moment or a feeling that's captured and sort of analyzed and articulated well. Like she loves you, yeah. There's a story happening there with characters, and there's past, present, and future things all happening in there. And there's characters that are not present and characters that are present. And there was what happened yesterday, and there's what happening today. It's very intricate and very planned and interestingly done. And not, like you said, nowadays it's just like there's these disconnected phrases, and there's nothing very linear necessarily even happening, you know. Like just yesterday, for example, I was listening to an 80s mix that I found, an old CD of an 80s mix. And you know, like songs on there like Papa Don't Preach or West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys. I listened to West End Girls yesterday by the Pet Shop Boys for the first time in years, you know, and I'm sitting there and I'm struck by it. It creates this world, you know, the way the chords hit and the images and the lyrics, the way the lyrics rub up against the chord progressions, and, you know, and the dramatic, you know, the dramatic sound that they're creating, and they're naming places, and they've got a sense of, there's like homeless people on the street or something, or whatever's happening there, like, you know, like, where the hell is that today? You're right, that's gone. There's none of that, you know.
I mean, you get your occasional flashes of brilliance, like I guess the biggest hit of the year would be Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo, and to me that's like, it was a breath of fresh air. It was like, you know, this is almost like very similar to what you would have heard from like 70s Elton John or 70s Queen or something like that, where it's just a plaintive piano ballad, but the song ascends, gets faster, the band comes in, and it's just like, okay, so there are people out there that want to put the effort in to learn the instrument, to sing live in a studio, not be auto-tuned, and have something to say, and the music is captivating, so it can be done.
Yeah, yeah. I'm embarrassed to admit I've heard all about how popular that song is, and I'm one of those people that resists that sort of thing. I don't know.
Well, she's got other songs that I'm like, I mean, she's
Yeah,
like an 18-year-old kid, but
I'll get
at
around to
least
hearing it.
it's like, at least there's that. At least there's like, and you've got other people that are similar age bracket that are doing stuff. It's just, I think last year, Bob Dylan put out that like 16-minute song about the Kennedy assassination, the Murder Most
Oh
Foul.
yeah, oh yeah.
But the thing is, I mean, the brilliance of that was putting it out online during the lockdown because of the captivated audience. Because you and I know 16-minute song, unless it's some crazy midnight DJ playing prog rock, they're not going to get a 16-minute long song on the radio. So he knew he probably won't ever play that song live. I mean, but it's like people are doing stuff now.
Yeah.
It's just now you got to kind of search it out for what you're into, and I think, even McCartney, I liked McCartney 3. Did you hear McCartney 3?
I listened to the whole thing once, and I'll get back to it at some point. There's something about, like, again, technology drives so much with me. Like, there's something about like the sound of a modern record, no matter who's making it. If they're doing it in a professional studio like he's doing it, I can only get so excited about it. You know what I mean? Like I grew up listening to those old warm magnetic tape textures of 60s and 70s, non-digital recording.
Analog, yeah.
Yeah, and you're familiar with the band Guided by Voices?
Yeah.
Yeah, like their earlier stuff, early and middle stuff, really excited me in the 90s, because they were just recording with a 4-track in their basement, and they captured something magical with that old technology kind of thing. And the McCartney stuff, it sounded good to me again, but the combination of him being 79 or whatever, and like the modern, nothing against them, that's not ageism or anything like that, but
well, plus, I mean, we talked about this before, and I think you even brought it up. It's at a certain point, probably even by the 70s, I mean, he's just competing against himself. So, well, let me posit this to you, riddle me this, I guess. If he would have been able to do that McCartney 3 album in a different setting, let's just say with like an 8-track, reel to reel, in a cabin in the woods with like Robbie Robertson, that's a different album, that's a different animal. And I think that people would be like, old man McCartney's done it again or something, because it would have had that McCartney 1 kind of vibe where he went off to Scotland. Because I think that it's true. It's like people were first kind of excited when they heard the first couple of songs, like, oh, wow. And then they listen to it and they're like, oh, and you see the video of him playing all the instruments and you realize, oh, well, someone's filming him. So people had access to him to do these things.
Yeah.
And he's got a board and you can see all the instruments and all of the soundproofing and the plastic divider walls. And you're like, whoa, how roughing it were you?
Yeah. Yeah, good point. And I think there's even a couple things on McCartney 1, like I think Maybe I'm Amazed, for example. That was done in Abbey Road studio. But then there's a bunch of other stuff that was done in his cabin, right? So, but I do definitely love that he did McCartney 3, because 1 was 1970 and 2 was 1980. And for years I've been wondering, he's going to do a 3. He's going to do a 3, and sure enough, he does it. But the ethos of all 3 were the same. It's just him. No other musicians are on any of those, and pretty cool,
No, yeah. I mean, very few people can do that. I mean, you've got, off the top of my head, it's like Prince, like maybe like a Lenny Kravitz, and then the list gets really short after that of people who can do everything. Um,
Yeah. Let me give a plug for Todd Rundgren. He's one of my favorite all-time guys.
right.
He used to do that too. He used to do like an album just himself. He'd hole himself up, and then he'd do an album with a band, and then he'd go back alone again. He'd sort of alternate, you know.
It's
But
kind of the same joke with Jack White was the joke was always Meg, play a 4/4 beat and I'll write an album. For the White Stripes, you know, and I got to give that guy a lot of credit. I think sometimes he kind of makes it more difficult on himself than he really needs to. But now, you know, under the Jack White name, he'll play with you know, 5 instruments and different players on stage and stuff. So, but he's definitely one of those guys that can kind of do it all. But
that's right.
Going back to the Beatles, I don't know. Do you think that other than the Epstein thing, that there was any other circumstance that could have been different or changed where they would have continued on? Like, I know there was talk, maybe they'll even talk about it in the Get Back documentary about doing like a show at the Roman Coliseum, and there was like a lot of stuff about them doing stuff in the desert or like a one-off that ended up being the concert on the roof. Do you know of anything, or you think that there could have been something?
Yeah, this is the sort of thing we've gone over in our minds so many times, right?
Right.
It's funny, and it's a fun exercise, you know. I mean, I think that just John Lennon, number one, was such a wild card.
Right.
I think Harrison would have stayed with the Beatles, honestly. I think that George was sort of like mini me of John Lennon in a lot of ways. He sort of followed John's lead in certain regards. Like there were times when George took the lead, like the whole Eastern thing with the sitars and going to India and all that. He was like leading the other 3 guys through that whole chapter of the Beatles. Like he was the head guy there. But you know, like if you've ever seen the footage of 1971 when they're recording the Imagine album, that was heavily filmed. You see George Harrison there sitting at their dinner table having tea with them, and he's just right along with Lennon, and you know, and like I feel like John Lennon was the wild card man who was just like when he met Yoko, he wanted to run and just go all over and do all this wacky shit, and you know,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was really encouraged by some of I think the first look footage that Jackson put out.
Yeah.
When you see Yoko and Linda laughing, like drinking and like laughing and high-fiving each other, it was like, because for the longest time we thought these two were sparring, like not fisticuffs, but verbally. And so to see them get along, you know, that was kind of heartwarming because, you know, I think I've seen the original Let It Be movie, but if it was so long ago, I don't know where you even find it now. Yeah. So this will probably be the definitive version for the next generation. I don't know. I don't know if it was just that, you know, the McCartney and Phil Spector thing where he just doesn't want to see it. But the weird thing is, and I'm about 90% sure, I'll ask you this. I think if Harrison would have lived, you never would have seen the Let It Be Naked album.
Oh, really?
Because he was so against McCartney taking the strings off that, you know, Spector put on there. And, you know, McCartney hated that album. Let It Be.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny. I was doing a little bit of reading. I think the Ian McDonald book, Revolution in the Head, by Ian McDonald was my main motivator to write my book. Ian McDonald's book spoke so, you know, directly to me, and it was so beautifully written. But what he suggests that John Lennon, when he got together with Phil Spector to do the Spector Let It Be album, if you look at side 1 and listen to it, you have Dig It, and then you have Let It Be, and then you have Maggie May. So it's like Lennon sort of did that on purpose to sort of as a FU to Paul kind of, to put this snarky, funny, jokey song here and the same type of funny, snarky, jokey song here, and then Let It Be in the middle like a sandwich or something. to really take the edge off of the heaviosity of Let It Be and that whole heavy organy heaviosity, but to take some of the profundity away from it or something. I don't know, or just to be a
Yeah, I
smart
mean, he made a
ass.
lot of those audio snide jokes, and
Yeah,
on behalf of the girls, I hope we pass the audition
yeah,
and things like
yeah.
that. But I have to say, though, I haven't listened to Let It Be Naked in a long time, but I think it starts with Get Back and ends with Let It
Yes,
Be. And
I'm
I
pretty
think
sure. Yes.
whoever sequenced it, probably George Martin, that's a better sequence. You want to start off an album, Gangbusters, you start with that drum roll,
Right. I agree. That's
that's
great.
just what a great way to start an album, and to end an album. How do you end an album better than the Let It Be song?
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I don't know if there's a definitive. I just feel like, I mean, you probably have your 2 cents about this. I feel like Let It Be Naked is just the McCartney version of that album. But I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if that album comes out if Harrison
Yeah.
lived. I don't know.
Yeah. It's good. That's a good point.
And
Um,
then go ahead. You can add if you want, or
no, just that McCartney. Yeah, the McCartney sanctioned for sure. And one more thing about Let It Be is like I'm not a huge fan of the fact that Across the Universe is on there on either. I think it's on both. I think it's
I think
on
so.
the Naked one too. And like that was a song that they recorded in early 1968, a full exactly entire year before the Let It Be sessions. Uh, and they did not do a slow version of Across the Universe during any of those Get Back sessions at all. They tried out some upbeat fast versions, faster with Ringo on the drums and stuff like that. But they didn't wind up using them. Like, there's a version that I have on a bootleg that's upbeat Ringo on drums Across the Universe that sounds pretty good. Why didn't they use that? Why did they go back and harvest this year old? And on the Spectre album, it's like slowed down and where he sounds like he's like fighting to stay awake, and it's like I always skip it. I cannot even listen to it.
Well, I mean, that also begs the question, since we're talking about it being recorded in early 68, why, oh, why you have a great song like that? Is that not on the White Album,
Ah,
which preceded that?
that's a good good question there
I
too.
mean, if you've got a slowed down version of Revolution that most people don't listen to on that album, and you can't, I would have substituted that with Across the Universe. I mean, that's just me. I mean, everybody would pull their, Revolution 9, and, then it becomes you make your own White Album or whatever.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, we weren't there. We don't know what they were thinking at the time. They probably had an embarrassment of riches because look at all the songs that did end up on the White
Yeah.
Album.
It
That's
was
talk
great.
about an embarrassment of riches.
Oh, it was so great.
Um,
Yeah. Great
oh,
stuff.
okay. So in terms of unreleased tracks or lost tracks, one thing that came up during the anthology project that didn't get used, that I guess Harrison vetoed in the 90s, and that's why it wasn't on there. And it was going to be, for what I know or heard, the worked on and released track for Anthology 3, because Anthology 3 didn't have a single, was Carnival of Light. Now, do you know anything about that? Have you heard anything about that?
You know, I know about the same as honestly. One of the things that Ian McDonald points out in his book that is actually a very astute point is that even if it, unless it was released by sanctioned and released by McCartney and the Beatles and Apple, if if you think you have it on a bootleg somewhere, maybe that's it, maybe it's not. There's no way you really could know because there's nothing Beatles sounding about it at all. Like their voices aren't even on it really, or they're just randomly hitting instruments or something, and nobody really knows what that's going to sound like. So there are like bootlegs around that say it's on, that's Carnival of Light, but there's no way to know if that's real or spurious. So it would have to come out officially for anybody to know. You know, so that's a good point.
I mean, I've heard quotes and clips and interview stuff with Harrison where he was like, "Yeah, there is something that exists called Carnival of Light that was recorded during the sessions for what became Sergeant Pepper, but it was just a mishmash. And it's, I mean, the amount of work he said that they would need to be to edit or record new music and do overdubs and do a new vocal with lyrics would have been like a Herculean effort, even more than like Free as a Bird or Real Love. So maybe in his mind there wasn't anything there, even like as a zygote or a skeleton of a song. And maybe McCartney was just like, I know one of you guys has this, and this is going to hurt the sales of Anthology 3. I don't know. I mean, there does seem to be in that anthology the video of them sitting on the lawn. There just seems to be a little bit of tension. Ringo seems to be the peacekeeper, but there's some tension between Harrison and McCartney where anytime it kind of veers into, well, what about this and what about that? Harrison is just hardline. Nope. Anyway, here's my ukulele. And
oh yeah,
I kind of sort of remember that, but I don't know. Do you think that there's a lot? I mean, we talked about the White Album with there being like an embarrassment of riches, but do you think there's still, I mean, even at this point, bottom of the barrel stuff that we haven't heard?
Well, it's funny. I love how you're quoting McCartney said that in Anthology. Oh, it's like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Yeah. But he did say, yeah, it's funny. I think that most of it's already been exhumed, either officially or on bootleg or whatnot. That's why I go back to that thing where if they want different permutations of the same music, they're going to have to go out and release, well, here's, here, there, and everywhere with just the voices, or they're soloing certain things and doing this. So there's almost an infinite number of permutations if you sit there and ride the faders up and down, and they can mess with that a little bit. Like the primary texts that we do have, which are the songs, are like there's only so many things you can do. So it's
but
funny
you don't
bring it
think
up.
that there's actually any completed songs, with all instrumentation and vocal that haven't seen the light of day?
No, nothing that's worthwhile,
because the Lennon stuff from the 70s that they used, that was even just haphazard, kind of like, is this thing on kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally does sound like Real Love. The vocal sounds like it's recorded in a closet or a bathroom or something. Granted, there's good acoustics in those rooms, but I don't know. Free as a Bird, I mean, that Lennon vocal is so removed. It's like, it's literally just sounds like there's a microphone in another room and not, it's like almost ghostly. I mean, that's just my ear hearing that Free as a Bird vocal, but I don't know. According to Paul, what I've read over the years is he thinks that Yoko and Olivia have stuff. And if they wanted to like another, I don't know what you would call it, because McCartney himself has got to stop doing the greatest hits thing, because it's like he's not, and the selling point of a lot of that stuff was always like, well, if you buy this greatest hits, you'll get this new song is the selling point, right? Or what they used to do was put like 3 live tracks. Like I have like a Queen greatest hits, I think it's of the 80s, and it has 3 live tracks. Kids today don't care about that. I mean, I'm of the generation where I had live albums, and it was great because like, oh, these are some bands that never come to my town and I'm never going to see them, or they've broken up and I wanted to hear what they sounded like live. Kids don't care about that. So I don't know. I just have this gut feeling like there must be stuff. If it keeps bubbling up in the press or in these interviews, or they dog McCartney about it, there must be something. I mean, other than Carnival of Light, which Harrison said is just bleh.
Yeah. Speaking again of those infinite number of ways that you can like permutate existing Beatles stuff, there's stuff all over YouTube lately, Eric, that I've been like sort of like discovering. Like, for example, there's something called Because 800% Slower. It's like so weird. It's like this, it's almost a strange satanic eerie sound wash. It's really weird. Another one's called Eleanor Rigby, but all notes are E and F. So somebody sat there and they used auto tune. Eleanor Rigby's of the rice in the church where a wedding is being like, and it's just like two notes.
Oh my God.
Another one's called Helter Skelter, but every other beat is missing. Like it's just weird, and I compare it to like cubism or something, in the art world. Like
Yeah,
it's just strange, interesting, weird things that people are doing with the primary text. They're taking the primary source and they're just effing with it and having fun and coming up with these new ways to reinvent. And I guess there's an infinite number of things you can do. Like there's another one's called Love Me Do, but every word is alphabetical. Like so, and it's like do all the do's are together, and it's like and everything's just like it's so strange. It's creative and interesting, but weird. And
yeah,
I don't
and
know.
sometimes the artists themselves will do these remixes because they're so tired of playing their 10 or 15
Yes.
hits in concert. And one of my favorite bands is Radiohead, and I wish that they would kind of go back to their 90s and early 2000s style, but whatever. So Tom York released this remix of Creep, but it was like an 8-minute long techno dirge of just stretching out everything. And I guess he wrote it for a fashion show, like you do. But yeah, I know they have a love hate with that song, that band with that song, but it's just when the original is so of a time and it's a live band in the studio and it's a time capsule. It's kind of like I wouldn't want to hear the Rolling Stones play Satisfaction any other way than the way I originally heard it. I mean, they can do extended solos. Those guys are amazing players, but there's just something about that song that when you want to hear that riff, you're like, yes, you know.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, because we've been going for almost an hour,
yeah,
I got to ask you. So you personally, when you were learning guitar and piano and singing, when you start, I know you've been in a couple Beatles cover band outfits and things. Do you remember the first time you stood in front of a crowd, could have been at a bar or open mic at a cafe or something, and played a Beatles song, and then everybody snapped their head around because they know those chords and that melody, that feeling of empowerment of just like, if I started my set with this song, I've got them. Do you remember that?
That's great. Yeah. The first time I played a Beatles song for anybody was at a little party I had, and I was probably 16, and I played just Rocky Raccoon, which is a very basic, easy song to play. And people sat and they listened and they enjoyed it. And I was like, wow, I played a Beatles song for people. And that was like the first moment. And then I was probably around, this was in Kent, probably around 23 or 24, when the Zephyr, remember the Zephyr?
Yeah,
Used to be a restaurant, now it's a bar. A friend of mine and myself, we sat and played acoustics and sang All I've Got to Do. All I gotta do. And I hit the high harmony and all that. And people were eating, and this, and they listened, and they were eating while they were listening, and they would occasionally, they would turn their head, but they would eat, and then they would look, and then they would eat. When we were done playing, everybody put down their silverware and clapped, the whole room. So that's the moment right there. And I'm pretty sure that I write about that in All I've Got.
But what's so great about that, and you have that memory as well, is I feel like when you do a great cover, it's like, I mean, I haven't played music for a long time, but back when I was doing like covers in LA of open mics and stuff, and they get that recognition is they're clapping because they like the song, number one. Number two, they recognize the song, famous song. And number three, not only did you do it justice, but you did it in a way that it's just like, I don't know, you put a hole, how should I say this? You put a pinhole in the nostalgia balloon but you didn't deflate it. Like you let a little air come down from the nostalgia balloon on them, and it's just like pixie dust or something. And they're just like,
Great.
oh yeah, yeah. Like, because everybody has that same thing with, like, if you flip through old radio stations, like classic rock radio stations in your car when you're driving, it's just, it takes you right back to where you were the first time you heard the song, who you were with, what town you were in, if you were in a car or you're in a bowling alley or a bar. And it's just like, it's a great feeling.
It is, man. It is great.
Well, yeah, I wanted to give you this last few minutes here. It's a platform for you to go ahead and plug away, like, any of your band stuff you've got going on, any new writing projects, your websites, just whatever you want to do, man.
Eric, I appreciate it very much, man. You know, so thanks for your interest in the book. Again,
so
sorry.
Yeah, they can see it.
Yeah, they're it's called Calling Me Back Again, The Beatles Records of 50. It's on Amazon, and Eric actually helped me out a lot with, he recommended the KDP website there, which people like us, that anybody who's wants to publish anything can go upload their manuscript, you know, step through some things. The most challenging thing was getting like the headers and the page numbers and the headers was the hardest part. You know, once you get that figured out, you upload your PDF and they print them to sell. So it doesn't cost you anything. You know, and people can buy them. So it's really cool. And another thing I love about it is I'm telling you right now, Eric, the copy you have is already kind of a little outdated, only in the sense of I've gone through and I've corrected like little typos, and I've tightened up like phrasings. And, you know, I just went through and with a dustpan and I just corrected little things, and it's really easy. You just correct it on your manuscript and you re-upload it, and that's the one they print next time it's ordered. So I've done that probably, like, you know, 7 or 8 times at this point. Where
you haven't had anybody that, I mean, I kind of rushed my poetry book through the system to try to get it out before the lockdown last year, and I had typos galore, a first page, first poem, but I never had anybody reach out to me and be like, how dare you, on page 17 there's 4 M's and a silent Q or whatever. I mean, has anybody reached out to you and been like, well, wait a minute, so and so got a newer version and it doesn't have this, or this is corrected?
No, nobody. I don't get that kind of feedback. I mean, I have some people say, hey, I read the book, great job, or hey, I'm rediscovering the Beatles, thanks so much, and little generic comments like that. But and one more thing I do want to, there's a plug for you, as Ringo says.
Righto. Packed with peanuts.
On the About the Author page, there it is. About the Author page, there's my music projects. Yeah, there it is. At the bottom, there's a listing of my music projects. They're all on Bandcamp. And the one that I really am excited the most about right now is called Real Topeka People.
Okay. Where did that name come from?
I wonder if any of our listeners recognize, but it's actually taken from the movie Almost Famous from the year 2000.
Yeah.
There's a scene where they wind up in Topeka, Kansas, and this van of teenagers rolls
You're
up. Hey,
real,
man.
Aaron.
Yeah, that's the scene. Yeah, that's the part. Yeah. And these kids roll up, hey, we're going to a party, man. You want to come? We're just real Topeka people, want to have a good time. Whatever. It has not.
That's
we're not
awesome.
From Kansas.
I mean,
that's all.
I thought maybe, but I'm like, I got to hear this from the horse's mouth. So,
but yeah, what I like, one more thing about Real Topeka People is we were talking earlier about that, like that DIY musical recording ethic of having it not be too clean, too crisp. It's got like a sort of a raw basement sound to it, and that's what I love about this band. It's all recordings of me and my bandmates from like 5 years ago, that from a basement. And now that I live in Washington, because I relocated a couple of years ago, and I don't see those guys as much anymore, and I don't play with anybody right now. So I've got this archive of old recordings, and what I do is I line them into my recorder, and I just overdub certain things, but it's still got that basement-y sort of like gnarly, natural sound, and I really love that about it. So that's the thing I like right now. I'm most excited about right now.
So why don't you just verbally tell people where they can find you and your work? I mean, I know the book is on Amazon, but for your
Yes.
band, or do you have a website with your name in the title? Or
You know what? I don't. I don't. I mean, you can find me at the E in John E. Saja. The E stands for Enzo. So if you just search John Enzo, that's my Facebook handle. You can find me on Facebook that way. John Enzo. I don't know how many John Enzos there are out there in Facebook land, but
you're the only one I've ever come across. I'm not saying it's got to be a phone book. Oh God, I just
yeah,
said phone book full of people,
yeah, it's
with
okay.
a
It's
similar
fine.
name in some town, but
Yeah,
I
and
don't know.
yeah, and so between the book was my main thing, and then the Bandcamp sites, I post on my Facebook wall about that a lot, and I set it to public. Sometimes, not always, but the Real Topeka People is a little tricky because I'm a school teacher. I'm a high school teacher, and the Real Topeka People has some blue comedy in there. Like there's some lyrical content that has to do with like sex and drugs and little
But you're a
scat.
rock band. I mean, come on.
Yeah, right. You're right.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like guys in a basement. It's guys in a basement improvising. So there's gonna be like inappropriate stuff that pops up, but it's in the name of like art and comedy and rock and roll, and it's all one big
I
piece.
just think
Yeah,
as long as you're not saying anything about people you work with or the school itself, I think you're 100% fine. And you gotta just like be yourself, man. You gotta just no barriers. Like for
yeah.
me, I
Thanks,
don't
man.
talk about like my family on this show just because I do drop F bombs and I do talk about lascivious stuff and I do have
Yeah,
co-hosts and people throw stuff around and you got to go
yeah.
with it because life is too short. I
I
made the
agree.
conscious decision not to talk about family stuff on this. And once I took that out of the way, it's like no sacred cows.
That's great. I 100% agree with that, man. Life is too short. You gotta grab it. You gotta enjoy it. Thanks
Well,
so
if
much for having me, man. Yeah.
I can't believe we've gone on for an hour here, but if I'm ever up in Washington or you're down here in Orange County or LA area, we'll have to meet and have a
Wow.
beer and talk about stuff. And
I'd love that.
or I haven't been back to Kent for 9 years, but maybe I don't know
Wow.
if you go back at all, but we'll have
I
to.
get there every maybe 2 to 3 years. I pop in. Yeah, just to pop in. How
All I've
far?
heard is everybody says it's looking more and more like Hudson.
Yeah, there's a new half to it for sure. There's a whole new developed part to it, which you can still find some, like the loft is still there and the Zephyr and stuff like that is still there. And but it's still like Last Exit Books is really cool. Like that
Okay.
bookstore is really cool.
The Kent
How,
stage.
yeah, as soon as I move out of town, they reopen that like right after I left.
Oh, and a friend of mine told me that they are closing the campus coffee shop that is a Starbucks that used to be Brady's, where I used to do open mic stuff there with my comedy
Yeah.
group and stuff. And the Kiva is still there at KSU. I did a number of shows there too. But
Oh wow,
um,
that's awesome.
we got to wrap it up, sir, because it has been an hour.
How far are you from Dodger Stadium? Because I like the baseball and I
I'm
like to
in
go
North
check out
Orange County now, so I want to say maybe an hour.
an hour. Okay, that's fine. So if I ever get down there, we'll definitely get together, man. And
Yeah, for sure.
likewise.
For sure. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks
It's
for
a lot
having
of
me.
fun. Again, lastly, John Saja calling me back again. The Beatles records at 50. If you're a Beatles fan, get the book. If you're a completist or not a completist, nothing's stopping you. All right. Well, have
Thanks,
a
man.
great rest of your weekend, sir. Thank
Thanks,
you
you
so much
too,
for being on
buddy.
the show.
Thank you, brother. Take care.
Thanks.
Peace.
Bye.
Peace and love. Peace and love.
Bye.